Dan Hurley proves time and time again he's one of us. You're Locked On UConn.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Little housekeeping for me, my YouTube support, absolutely fantastic. I'm just blown away by all of the love I get from my subscribers. Downloading the audio version is equally as important. So wherever you get your podcasts, if you've already subscribed, make sure you download the audio version. So click that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen, then head over to Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. This way you'll I can't tell you how much your support means to me. It's everything. If you're tuning in from your car or an audio listener exclusively, give us a 5-star review. Good reviews trigger referrals for similar shows. I think I got something like 20 plus on Apple, over 15 on Spotify. So we can pump those numbers up. That would be great. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Speaking of Dan Hurley, we're going to really dive into him today. He had a really illuminating interview on Dan Patrick's show today. But if you are an everydayer, if you are a UConn Locked On insider, go to my subtext page. It is subtext.com/Dan Hurley. If you use that promo, you get 3 months off. First 40 subscribers get that 3-month discount to get this thing rolling and get some extra content that is behind a paywall. So let's talk about Dan Hurley itself. His interview today was classic Dan. And I say that because he puts a lot of things into perspective. And I think he really proves to a lot of people that he is one of them. And the first question that Dan Patrick talked about was, did you splurge? Did you buy anything when you got this new contract? And if there wasn't a guy that is similar to me in the respect of what he looks at and kind of pines for, now Dan Hurley could easily get one of these. He said he didn't get one, but a vintage Bronco. I think he's wrong that the company's in California. It's in Atlanta, at least the one that I'm thinking about. If you're not sure, go on Vintage Broncos. It's on Instagram. You'll know exactly what Dan's talking about. Just they basically take the shell of an old vintage Bronco. They soup it up and they create kind of a modern version with an old school feel. So you get all the same trimmings, the leather. It's kind of handcrafted, so it's really done to your specifications. It's something like $200,000, $250,000 car. So that's something that he looked at, and it fits his persona because he talked about his Ford Raptor being his armor. In that it was inspired by the pickup trucks on watching Yellowstone, something I watch on a regular basis and something I really kind of resonate with as well. Truck symbolizes his, different personas, that he only drives it during the season as crazy as he is. And I love that about him. A little more tougher, but also in the off season, he's in there fixing the engine and talking to it, making sure the car knows that he loves it. He only drives it during the season, as I said, kind of keeps it maintaining. And I just think it's funny because Dan transitioned to the moment that him and Andrea were on their first date. Dan's truck got stolen. And he basically had a moment where he was talking about that he's not romantic enough to have that done on purpose, that was actually the case, and that it was kind of an awkward situation because he was meeting the parents on the following day. So he had to have her stay at the apartment and had to go pick her up. They had to come pick her up on campus. So I just thought that was really funny. But what we all really kind of wanted to hear from him, I think, is what he talked about the reasons why he stuck around at UConn. And I think we've belabored this point a ton, but what struck me in the conversation was him continuously saying about how he wants to coach somewhere where he can coach. This yawning is getting out of control, guys, but I'm trying to get it under wraps. Go somewhere where, be somewhere where he can coach, and that's UConn. And how he's essentially looked at it from the perspective of, Jeannie Buss and Rob Pelinka made it really difficult for him to say no. It was the parcel their pitch is what made him think about it. But when he broke it down, the importance of his family, the importance of having them want to be on board, and he knew that wasn't going to be the case. And also, I think he also said that in college, and this is 100% true, he values his impact, that he gets to set the tone with his players, pick his players, have a significant impact on the team's success, because he's doing all of those things. He's not just a cog in the wheel. Like, he talks about it being organizational, but he's the king. You know what I mean? Like, he's the GM, he's the coach, he's the product development guy. Like, it's like having a startup, and you're basically doing all the things on your own. You add pieces, you have people that help you, but if you're the founder, if you're the guy this is your vision, it all falls on him. No one is going to go to Kamani Young and at the end of a game and say, hey, what happened today? If there's a tough loss, that falls on Dan. So all of that responsibility, that's something that he wanted and he craves, because he likes that control. He likes that aspect of actually developing and coaching. He, discussed obviously that the allure was there. But then he came back. We all famously were following this, like, we're detectives, and was at Madison Square Garden at the Billy Joel concert. And being a Jersey guy and being in New York, that kind of stuff is really difficult to see him in Los Angeles. And ultimately, I think that made the decision. I thought this was an interesting one, because he talked about how he was surprised that people were shocked that him and his wife make joint decisions. And I think that's more for younger people and people who are really like skeptical, or they have just a really kind of warped view of what marriage is, what life is, that if the husband, who's the breadwinner in this case, makes a decision, the wife just kind of goes along. And, he acknowledged that she went kicking and screaming from Staten Island to Rhode Island, because who the hell wants to live in Rhode Island, right? Right, Providence fans? But at the same time, I think it's one of those deals that ultimately, when you're making this big a decision, where you're going 3,000 miles across the country, uprooting your entire life and family, it's a little different when you move. I'll give you a great example. A little different from when I moved from New Haven to New York City. Not much changed in my life, other than the fact that it was more expensive. But there was a big decision when I went from Connecticut to LA in 2004. I mean, took all these different moving parts, and I'm not a world-class head coach. So he emphasized that, and how, his wife may have had veto power in the past, but Dan asked him if he really wanted it, would he have been able to convince his wife? And he said yes. So she may have been pissed off, but they were going to go. So let's talk about something, as I yawn for the fourth time. Good Lord. Woke up early this morning. We're going to talk about his coaching philosophy, and something that I think that UConn fans, as I've been talking about recruiting a lot, he touched on it again today, and I think you guys will be very happy about his coaching philosophy, his underdog mentality, and the recruiting and maintaining that identity. Coming up after this. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performances. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP. Bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, we're back on Locked On UConn. Segment 2 of the program is a continuation of Dan Hurley in that great interview with Dan Patrick. Dan Patrick is the GOAT. He's one of my favorite broadcasters of all time. I think he does an amazing job of kind of disarming his guests, and all the years on SportsCenter. He's my childhood. Him and Keith Olbermann doing SportsCenter, the whiff. I just think, for me, whenever he does a high profile interview, I'm always all ears. So it just how happens that he covered the head coach of the UConn Huskies, who we live and die with every day. And, I think this was the key thing in Hurley acknowledged that there's a challenge here. With increased success comes increased visibility, comes increased want. It's like, it would be like if I won the lottery when I was 25 years old. And that just goes to show you how old I am, that I didn't call it Powerball or something like that, or Mega Millions. But if I won a absurd amount of money as a young man, and I wasn't attached, and I wasn't particularly disciplined, I might have done something really silly in my life, which is, spend lavishly and do all this crazy stuff, and really not focus on the things that I was raised to, which is, be a good person, be a good human, settle down, things of that nature. And I think for me, you can hear that in Dan's voice, that I think that the struggle is you get the shiny object, which is, he called they're the program that's the shiny object right now. But I think what he's talking about in particular is in the recruiting and maintaining identity is they have been successful with bringing in guys who they have developed. Have they brought in 5 stars? Yes. Steph Castle. Have they got in borderline 5 stars, 4-star players? Sure. Jordan Hawkins, I believe, was a 4-star. Guys who they were able to get to the next level. Donovan Clingan, I think, was a 4 or 5-star. So look, it's one of those things where it's not like they've been devoid of talent. I think that's what's important to understand. But because he has that underdog mentality always, where he wants guys to come in hungry and make sure it's a win-win situation. I think that was the key to the conversation with Dan Patrick today. Is he said that his ultimate goal is to find people who want to have a win-win situation. It's not enough at UConn, and I'm going to make this parallel because we've heard coaches say it is enough for them to just get the kid to the next level and change their life. I'm talking to you, John Calipari. It's not enough. If you're going to spend the time and the investment, now especially in the money investment with NIL, to bring a kid in and pay him to come to your school through an NIL collective, they need to deliver you championships. There is a return on investment. 100%, Dan Hurley talked about that today, that he has to find players who are not only all in from a monetary perspective, but are all in mentally, physically, emotionally to UConn, that are serious people. He said that phrase numerous times, and even in this interview again today. You want serious people, old school mentality people that are going to come in and say, yes, you're paying me $600,000 to come here. I totally understand that. It's life-changing money for me and my family already, but that's the beginning. That's the beginning. The beginning is I get paid for this, and in return, I'm going to give you all of myself for this short period of time. If I'm a one-and-doneer, or if I'm only going to be here for 2 years like Donovan Clingan, I'm going to deliver on my promise of championships. And for UConn, it's not enough to just say, hey, we've got, what a lot of these Duke fans and a lot of these Kentucky fans say, and particularly lately, well, we've had 27 first-round picks in the last 7 or 8 years. Who cares? I honestly could care less if every one of the Team USA members that are in this in the Olympics in 2024 were filled with UConn or filled with Kentucky and Duke players. Why I don't care is because they didn't win at the college level, because they didn't fulfill a promise to their coach at that moment. And maybe their coaches don't care. Maybe Coach K doesn't care. Maybe John Shire doesn't care. Maybe John Calipari doesn't care. However else you want to, I do think, though, when we're talking about the new Kentucky, I think Mark Pope will care, because Mark Pope was not a superstar player. Mark Pope was a part of a great elite team at Kentucky in 1997. And I think that is going to change there. Unfortunately, they don't deserve a guy like him to come in and build a program, but that's another story. But I found that so interesting that he is flat out just said on national radio that he is expecting players to give them what they said they would sign up for, which is to win. It's not just good enough to come here and say, well, I'm a UConn player, I put on that jersey and that's it. No, there's an expectation that comes with putting on that UConn jersey and having that Husky logo behind me on your lapel, on your shorts, wherever You wear hats. You get all this swag. You represent it to the best of the ability and to the fans. I mean, this fan base is rabid. I'm the fastest growing show on the Locked On Podcast Network because of you guys, not because of how amazing I am at hosting a podcast. It's because you guys want more UConn content. So I love that and I appreciate it. So he talked about that and I found that so fascinating. I also found this. We had Tyler Cassidy on a Big East Barroom, who we're going to mention later in the show as well. He was at the event that Gino and Dan were on together when all this started to leak a little bit. It didn't drop yet, but some of the whispers and all this other stuff. And Gino was on Dan Patrick a while back talking about how he said to Dan on that night, you should probably just go to the Lakers and you could probably win a championship there. And Dan looked at him like, what are you talking? Like, does he know? And so they talked about that. Go listen to the Dan Patrick. I think it's about a 15-minute interview. It's hysterical because Dan really was like just totally distracted at this event. And when we had Tyler Cassidy on doing our Big East review, it could have been about the Dan Hurley stuff, or it could have been about the Big East review. Regardless, he came on the show. It was with his mom, and he said that, they could tell that Dan was distracted. He made some really curt answers, probably because his head was someplace else, because it was about to drop that he was going to take this meeting with the Lakers. So Dan got a little messed up by Gino's premonition, if you will. Maybe Gino knew something and he just was kind of messing with I could see Gino being that practical joker where he knew what it was and kind of like mess with them a little bit and kind of a wink and a nod, like, hey, you should go to the Lakers, and just see Dan's face. So that was really good. And I thought it was funny too that Dan talked about how he texted with LeBron, said he'd be happy to take on any James sons to further college. I'm assuming he's talking about Bryce, because I don't know if that time, I guess Bronny hadn't decided whether he was going to stay in the draft, but that was pretty funny too. Look, Dan Hurley also addressed that he is not going to be looking at NBA jobs, at least for a few years. He said that his going out to LA kind of scratched that itch for at least a few years. He kind of knows what it is. Mentioned then to that he's still number 2 in the Hurley family as far as coaching, that his dad Bob is number 1. But if he does 3P, he thinks that maybe that warrants him being on top. But knowing that Bob Jr., his brother Bobby, has his sights on trying to win a national championship as well. So don't know if that's happening at Arizona State, but you never know. So one quick recruiting update is, and I swear, guys, I've had so many people that tell me I'm the worst at pronouncing names. I guess I take after my father. Funny story about him, I will tell another time. But once he gets a name in his head, he does not. If anyone corrects it, he has a hard time changing it. And I'm getting older. Maybe that's part of it. But Tunde Yusufo. Maybe I said it right. Maybe I didn't. I looked it up. I think I said it right phonetically. Maybe I'm wrong. He had a great game at Peach Jam just a couple days ago. Had 23 points, 6 rebounds. Kid is an absolute tank. Shooting guard, 6'6", 6'7". He told some folks down there in the recruiting world at the EYBL Peach Jam that Mark Pope, Tommy Lloyd, Rick Barnes, USC's head coach, UCLA's head coach, Mick Cronin, Bobby Hurley was there. Dan Hurley was there from UConn. He's planning on taking a visit to UConn this fall. He did get an offer from both Coach Hurley and Kamani Young. So this kid has been offered. If you look at him, he looks like he is an NBA body already. Would be an absolute crazy good addition to this UConn backfield wing situation. But that's my only update. People ask me about AJ DeBonsa. He has UConn in his top 8, but they haven't really reached out to him. And the only thing I can tell you is that from folks that I've spoken to in the recruiting industry, he is 100% trying to go to a college where he's featured, where he is everything that we just spoke about a win-win situation for recruiting. AJ DeBonsa is not what UConn is looking for. If that changes, if that conversation is had and they look at it from a different angle and they think, yeah, this kid is legit, he's exactly what we're looking for, then maybe that's something that they would entertain. But as of right now, I don't think that AJ is on their radar. He definitely has an offer. Don't get me wrong. If he committed to UConn tomorrow, I'm sure Dan and Kamani and Luke would figure out a way to work AJ into the mix and get all of the NIL stuff figured out. Doesn't really work that way, but I'm just saying in a perfect world. And the last thing I'll say before we get on to the last topic, which is the TBT and some other podcasts I want you to help subscribe to and talk about what they do, and do a little promotion for my buddies across Connecticut in the podcast world, is recruiting as a whole has changed so much. Not just forget about NIL. NIL is completely changed the landscape of what college basketball is about. But remember what I say. I say it every time we talk about recruiting. If you miss on a kid, even if it's someone that you really wanted freshman year, unless they are a one and done like AJ or like a Cooper Flag, there is a possibility you get him on the back end, sophomore, junior year. Or if the kid plays all 4 years, you get him a senior year or a fifth-year transfer. So that's why they cast such a wide net. So if you're like, oh, I haven't heard anything about why is it Caden Lewis calling UConn as top 4, Darius Adams Jr. Those guys have offers, and they are narrowing it down. But they're also kind of thinking, I mean, every kid has to do this now. I go somewhere my freshman year. If it doesn't work out, I look at who are the other 3 teams that were on my list. Do they need a point guard? Do they need a shooting guard? Do they need a center? All that stuff. So whoever we talk about on this show, or you see it, if it doesn't seem like it's a fit right now, it's because they're sending out feelers. There's tampering happens all year. And if you already have a relationship with someone and they text you like, hey, it's not working out at Villanova, I would love to see what it's like at UConn next year. Okay, we'll talk in the future. You know what I mean? Like, so all of that is happening on a daily basis. So just so you guys understand that when it comes to guys like AJ and other top recruits that you may not be a fit right now, like I said, unless they're a one and done and they're going to the NBA, that's open season. Once the season ends, you know, you're kind of looking at that transfer portal and guys are reaching out to other people that they've talked to in the past. So are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn on the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. We'll talk stars of stores in the TBT coming up after this. Okay. You're back on Locked On UConn, last segment of the program. Before we get into let's talk about TBT first. Again, open practice tomorrow at Brian McMahon High School in Norwalk, Connecticut. They'll have practice open to the public from 2 to 4 p.m., followed by an autograph session with the players until 5 p.m. Tickets are $25. All proceeds will benefit the Brian McMahon High School. So that goes to their athletic department. Please get your tickets. I think you can get it if you have a Twitter handle, go to Stars of Stores. Like, it's exactly how it sounds on their Twitter handle, STARS of Stores, STORRS. Cool logo. Mostly UConn-based team. Love it. I reached out to Chris Smith today. Reached out to the Stars of Stores team, Mark D'Amelia. I'm hoping that we can get some guys on the program before they actually have games or during the tournament to kind of go through their entire game day. And as this tournament starts, I am going to be all in following this and talking about this like the lead story. Unless we land Malik Thomas the day that they play a game, we're gonna open with Stars of Stores and hopefully follow Ryan Boatwright, follow Joey Calcaterra and their journey to bring in another title to UConn, albeit a tournament that's not traditional. But I'm super excited about it. You can find the games, I believe, on FS1. I'm looking this up right now. Is TBT on TV? Let's check out the schedule. It's on the Fox Sports family of networks. So I know our last promo asked if you were watching Fox Sports or ESPN and tired of all that screaming. You don't get screaming at the games unless you get an excited broadcaster. But it looks like, whether it's the TBT live stream, but it's on FS2, FS1, Big Ten Network. We'll figure it out when they get a little closer to the game. 6 p.m. is Stars. The first game is on the TBT live stream. So if you don't have that, try to figure out where you can find that. I'm pretty sure it'll be on the website of the basketball tournament, TBT, because they're playing Herkimer's Originals. Again, a team that's made up of mostly like Division II, Division III players. Probably should win the game going away. But like I've said, teams been playing for a while together. Sometimes, stuff happens and you have a hard time with guys who aren't as talented. But I want to talk about a couple different things. Number one, other podcasts that you should subscribe to, that you should listen to for my old heads, maybe 35 and up. That 35 isn't old, but maybe 40 and up, whatever. Hell, 42 is not old. I'm old, but the Dream Season pod. Matt Edwards, phenomenal at what he does. I mean, if you are nostalgic about UConn basketball, even in the little bit, or if you're a younger kid and you're like, man, I go back to, my first real team was 89, 90, but some guys who reached out to me, their first like real team that they were really cognizant about was 1997 or 99, the 99, 98, 99 team that won the national championship. So if that's you and you want an oral history of what that Dream Season was about with Jim Calhoun and, kind of how it started even before that season started, dude and dudettes, ladies and gentlemen, please go check that out. And something that's more topical, I don't remember, I haven't asked Jared this, how often he does his podcast, but Jared Kotler and the Connecticut Scoreboard podcast, absolutely love his show. Has popular guests like Dan Hurley, Alex Caravan. I think he does the Caravan and Kotler show, which is pretty fun during the season. So hopefully you can check that out. Make sure you get some subscribers there. Subscribe to their YouTube channels. I don't think Dream Season has a YouTube channel, but you can find it on audio. I think Jared has it in both. Connecticut Scoreboard podcast is on both YouTube and on audio podcasts. And then the other ones. Oh, first off, Big East Ballroom, Tyler Cassidy. I think they have a YouTube channel. If they don't, definitely check them out on Twitter and also on audio podcasts, Apple and Spotify. Mike and his son Joseph from the Sliders and Curveballs podcast. Mike reached out to me. We're going to probably do some crossover stuff with them. I'm super excited about that. I just think it's fantastic that him and his son have this podcast where they have a hobby together that's really fantastic. It's a wonderful thing. Listen to a few episodes and it's fun. It's a totally different experience. Most of the time they're, I think they did a couple interviews. They had like Hassan Diarra on. So go check that out. Again, find it wherever you can. Again, Sliders and Curveballs podcast. And then this one's an interesting one. John Pettit, who was a writer for the Meriden Record Journal. He used to write stories about me in the Record Journal when I was playing tennis and all my friends that were playing baseball, basketball, that kind of stuff. Him and his buddies do a show called Bristol Boys, and it's spelled Bristle, Bristol Boys. So I don't know if they have a YouTube channel. I think it's all audio. Check that out on wherever you get your audio podcasts. Show some love to John and his fam there. I just want to make sure that you guys know that I am 100% all in on UConn content. If you have a UConn show and you want to reach out to me and talk to me about collaboration, you want to talk about show topics, hit me up, lockedonyuconn@gmail.com. And let's have a conversation. Would love to, eventually do some stuff in the Northeast. Obviously, you guys know that I'm based in North Carolina, so that's challenging, but I am going to try to find some strategic games to go to this year on the road and at home. So you will definitely see me in stores this year. And if you're lucky enough, maybe you'll see me on the road as well. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It's now also available on the Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. This has been another episode of Locked On UConn. Make sure you go and subscribe to all of my friends. Dream Season Pod, Connecticut Scoreboard Podcast, Sliders and Curveballs, Bristol Boys. But once you're done with that, make sure you come and subscribe to all of my stuff. I'm your host, Mark Zanetto, asking you to stay locked in, stay connected, make sure your toughness meter is always rising. And as always, go Huskies.